It takes half your life before you discover that life is a do-it-yourself project. Napoleon Hill. Projects are the practical engine that help us turn our abstract visions into tangible goals and then executing them into reality. And in this video, we are going to explore the project tracker, which is the central database and the central dashboard that helps us do exactly that. Welcome to the Notion of Life series, in which we are building the ultimate Notion system that helps you get more result with less effort. In the last video, we had a look at the knowledge database, which is basically the process that we use to capture information, both external and internal, capture it, store it, and resurface it later so we can use it. In today's video, we are covering the project tracker, which is the practical engine that helps us take our vision goals, translate them into SMART goals, and then bringing together the required resources, the knowledge and the execution to actually turn those objectives into reality. Now, some practical information before we get started. There is timestamps in the description down below, so you can just scroll to the parts of the video that seem interesting to you. You can also turn up the playback speed if you think that I'm not already speaking fast enough, and all the links, assets, resources mentioned in this video are linked in the description down below. Let's start by looking at the key goal of the project tracker. The goal of the project tracker is to help us translate our vision goals into achievable SMART goals, and then providing us with a practical engine that can help us execute on these goals. So the vision goals we are going to cover later on in this system. They are abstract and long-term goals. We then want to reverse engineer those long-term goals into achievable SMART goals. And the project tracker is helping us set these SMART goals and then creating a practical engine, something that we can use on a continuous basis to actually execute on these goals. And we do that by bringing together the various required parts like the knowledge and the execution. So we bring together everything that we might need into one central place, into one central dashboard to help us execute on these goals. So we're taking our goals and we're manifesting them into reality. Now, the first thing that we are going to do is have a general look at what a project is and why it is important to set projects. After that, we are going to go into Notion and have a look at the project tracker database. Then inside that database, we are going to look at the different templates that we have for our projects, and we're going to end this video with looking at the different views and the different views that we have integrated in the different zones. So let's start at the beginning with a general introduction into projects. To really understand the value and the importance of projects, we first need to take a few steps back. And we're starting at this first principle of nature, which is basically that the essence of nature is change. And what this means is that everything in life is continuously changing. Everything in reality is continuously changing. There is nothing here that is permanent, right? So you can see over here, the square starts like this, and then it's rotating, it's rotating, it's rotating. It is always in movement. So then the question becomes not if things are changing, but how things are changing. And that is where we as humans have influence. Now, we only have influence over a very small part of this change, right? The vast majority of everything that's happening in the universe is outside of our control. But part of it is inside of our control. We can take a part of the universe and say, I want it to change in this particular way. And the way in which we want it to change is based on our personal needs and desires. So let's say, for example, that we are living in this Minecraft world, right? Everything in this world is made out of blocks. And in a way, everything in our reality is made out of blocks. It's just more complex. But for now, let's say we are living in this Minecraft world. What I could be doing here is I could say, hey, I want to make a very simple configuration of these blocks. I want to take these 4 blocks together and I just want to build a cube with it. That's a very simple pattern that I want to make. I could also say, actually, I want to make a slightly more complex pattern. I maybe want to make this pyramid over here, or I want to make this beautiful configuration of blocks that is all the way over here. Now, these are all just different configurations of the same blocks. One is just very small and simple, and the other one is very big and complex. So when we set goals in life, basically what we're doing is we're saying, I want a certain piece of reality to be structured in a certain way. This over here has become my goal. That is where I want to go. Now, the size of goals can range a lot. I can have a small goal like making a cup of coffee, or a bigger one like graduating from my bachelor degree, or a very big one like going to Mars. But in essence, I am doing the same thing. I'm just taking these blocks and I'm just configuring them in a different way. And in that sense, goals are also very arbitrary. And this is something I had a lot of difficulty trying to figure out when building this system, because I was thinking, when is something a vision goal? When is it a SMART goal? When is it a project? When is it a milestone? When is it an action? Because all of these, they seem so arbitrary. And then I realized that is because they are arbitrary. We can just set these lines wherever we want to set them. But the thing is, we do want to set them somewhere, right? So we have these arbitrary goals ranging from small to big that help us to actually have a more concrete grasp of reality. And then so, in essence, what a project is a practical engine to help us reach the desired goal, right? So if I want to get here, I need a practical engine to get to that place. I need to bring together all the different parts, the different resources that I need to get there, the knowledge, the people, the capital, the execution. And a project is simply a way of bringing together all these parts. And inside a Notion of Life, we bring together all these things inside the project tracker, inside the project dashboards that we have. The question then becomes is, which goals should we be setting? And the way we determine that is by gaining wisdom and insight. So wisdom is knowing which pattern do I need and which pattern do I desire. Of all these different patterns that could be built into reality, of all these different things that I could be doing, what is it that I want to be doing? What is it that I desire and need to be doing? That is what requires wisdom and insight. And over here you can see we take this blocky reality and we sort of create this outline of the structure that we want to be forming. Then the next thing is how to actually structure the objects of reality into that desired pattern. How are we going to take these squares that we have over here and actually fit them into the desired pattern? That is where we need knowledge. And in the last video, we explored the knowledge database in depth. That is knowing how to structure reality in the way we want to structure it. Then next up is the execution of doing this. So we know this is the pattern I want to be making. This is the thing I want to be doing, right? I want to graduate from my bachelor's degree, or I want to go shopping and cook this meal. That is what I want to be doing. In order to do that, I need to go to the grocery store. I need to get all the ingredients. I have this recipe. That is what I need to do in order to make that pattern into reality. And then I need to do it. I need to execute on the plan that I made. I need to influence the world to create this planned structure. And that, of course, is where we have the action tracker and the daily things that we are doing on the execution level. And then the bigger the change that we want to make in the world, the more influence that we have, the more production capacity that we need. And this is a concept that Stephen Covey illustrates in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And what he says is there's two things going on at all times. There's always the need to produce something, and then there is the capacity to actually produce that. And those two things need to be in balance. He's giving this story of a goose that lays golden eggs. And every day the goose lays one golden egg. But at one point the farmer becomes impatient and he cuts open the goose in an attempt to get all the eggs in one go. And okay, sure, he gets 3 eggs in one go, but then the goose is dead. And in the weeks after that, obviously, it's not producing any golden eggs. And down the line, the farmer is much poorer than if he had just waited every single day. So the production capacity of the goose and the actual production were no longer in balance. And the same is true for our personal production capacity. There is a certain capacity that we have to produce things, and then there is the actual production that we're doing. Now, our production capacity consists out of our knowledge plus our execution. So together, our knowledge and execution forms our production capacity. So suppose that we want to create this thing over here, right? This is the configuration of reality that we want to make. That requires a certain amount of production capacity. It requires us to be able to actually lift up this thing over here. Now, in this particular case, we do not have the production capacity necessary. So this just remains a vision, a wish. It just remains a pattern that we would like to be. But it is not something that is. In order to make this thing balance out, we need to have enough production capacity. So then naturally the question becomes how to increase your production capacity. Now there's two different ways that we can do this. The first way is by increasing the size of our personal production capacity. And the way we do this is through learning and skill acquisition. And this is why we have the whole knowledge database. This is why we have the whole knowledge flow, to learn new information, to make sure that we have at least the knowledge part of the production capacity figured out. Then the other part is skill acquisition. That means how well can we execute on this knowledge, right? Do I know how to program? Do I know how to build a house using wood? Do I have the social skills that are necessary? So basically we can increase our own capacity by becoming more competent. Then the next thing that we can do is actually increase the quantity. And the way we do this is by either influencing people or by influencing robots. So instead of making our own circle bigger, instead of making our own capacity bigger, we make sure we get more people and more robots to contribute. Now, the way that we influence people is by using social dynamics and by using capital. So we can either have tremendous social skills, you can be very confident, you can be good at speaking to people, maybe you have leadership qualities. So that's like social dynamics, influencing people through social dynamics, or we can influence them through capital, which is basically what we do every single day when we go to work, right? I go to work because somebody else is giving me this capital. Otherwise, I wouldn't show up. But their money is making me do what they want me to do. So influencing humans can be done by improving your social skills or by getting more capital. Robots, on the other hand, are influenced by technical skills. So it's basically my ability to program, my ability to engineer hardware. And we are currently living in the age of robots, right? Naval Ravikant has this quote that I really like where he says, "The robot army is already here. The robot revolution has already happened." We are already living in a world of robots. Just most of these robots are packed in data centers for heat and efficiency reasons. So there is already a lot of robots around us. And especially now with the rise of AI, there's so much robot power available. And the only bottleneck is, can we influence that? Our bottleneck in influencing that is our technical skills. Now, of course, these two things aren't necessarily separate, because I could also hire a human to actually influence this robot. And I can also use robots to make humans more productive by giving them planning tools, for example. But basically, these are the two production capacity units that we can increase. So if we have a look over here, we have this same constellation that we had before, right? This is the thing that we wanted to build. But now we have increased our leverage. We've increased our production capacity to be actually able to lift this thing into reality. The first thing we did is we increased our own production capacity by learning and skill acquisition. Then the second thing that we did is we influenced humans and we influenced robots to increase the quantity of the production capacity that we have. And then in total, all of that capacity together was enough to actually lift up this object. Now, in choosing the object that you want to lift, I would recommend finding something that is right on the edge of what you are capable of. Because when we're at the edge of what we're capable of, that is when we get flow. That is when we get meaning. If we go too far over the edge, we risk burning out. We're trying to lift something that we can't really lift. We're overexerting ourselves. And on the flip side, if we're trying to lift something that is way too light, we risk getting bored out. It becomes so boring because it's super easy. It is super repetitive. So try to find something that is like on the edge of your personal production capacity. So then, what is the edge of your production capacity? Well, that is what we call your zone of influence. Now, I am very much aware that this is a very overwhelming page, so just bear with me. I'm going to walk you through all of these different things. What we see over here is Project Humanity. This right here is the biggest project that we as humans can conceive. It's the project that we're all working on together. It is humanity. It is everything that we're trying to do. It is civilizations. It's people collaborating. It is anything that we as human beings can conceptualize, right? Everything happens within this larger sphere of Project Humanity. Now, within this super large mega project, each and every one of us has a zone of influence. And the zone of influence is basically saying, this right here is part of this really big project that you get to be the owner of. You are responsible of this piece. You get to be autonomous in this piece. This is for you to figure out. This zone of influence, it grows as we increase our leverage and our competence. So as we are increasing the size and the quantity of our production capacity, so does our zone of influence increase. So before it was over here, now this has become our zone of influence, right? So over here, the dotted lines are everybody else, and the solid lines, that is basically us. So our position in this Project Humanity. Now, certain parts of this project are permissionless and skill locked. And what that means is this is part of the project that I am now trying to take ownership over, and nobody else is trying to do this. So this is just part of Project Humanity that it's uncharted territory. Nobody wants to do this. I am going to do this. The only way I can figure it out is if I get the required knowledge and skills. So let's say, for example, that I want to make an artwork, I want to make a drawing, I want to draw something that has never been seen before. I don't need permission from anyone to do that. And there's nobody else who's trying to make the same drawing or draw on the same sheet of paper. That is just completely my thing to do. And I could just draw there whatever I want, right? And the same goes for building things, for work, for entrepreneurship. Maybe there's part in your organization, a certain job that nobody really wants to do. Nobody has maybe even seen that this is a thing that can be solved. And then you decide like, hey, I'm going to go in there. I'm just going to solve this thing. It is permissionless. I don't need permission to do it. But it is skill locked. I do need to have the required skills. I do need to be able to draw before I can make that drawing that I want to make in there. Now, another thing that might happen is that our zone of influence is overlapping with somebody else's zone of influence. And then over here, we have a overlap. And that overlap requires us to get permission. We need to get permission from this other person to either collaborate there, or if we don't get permission, we need to compete, which we will discuss in a little bit. But basically what's happening in these overlapping areas is that we need permission, and very often these are resource locked, because what I want to do is I want to have this human resource. I really hate this term, but that's what we call it. I want to have this human resource over here, or I want to have this capital resource, and I want them to help me achieve this thing where the overlap is. So whenever two zones of influence overlap, that overlapping part, that is where we need permission. That is very often where we need resources. And then this non-overlapping part over here, once again, permissionless and skill locked. That is just me doing my thing. When we are then having these overlaps happening, there's two different mindsets that can occur. The first one is that we are in a zero-sum competition. And basically what that means is this overlapping part over there, it's either going to be mine or it's going to be yours. That is when competition happens. This is a limited resource, so either you get the fuck out or I get the fuck out. But we are not going to be able to share this part. So in this particular case, I had to forego part of my influence for someone else. I got out-competed by someone else. The second form that we have, the second way of thinking that we have is positive sum collaboration. And this is the idea that actually when our two zones of influence overlap, it's not a competition, but 1 + 1 = 3. By working together, we can create more value for both of us. And I think generally speaking, especially in our modern world, this is a much better approach because we can create value. Technology allows us to create ever-growing value, right? We're just continuously making more and more value. Nowadays, everyone can have a house, everyone can have a TV, everyone can have running water. That didn't used to be the case 200 years ago. So we can create more value than we initially had. So this over here is scarcity mindset. This over here is abundance mindset. And I think that's both a better way to live your life mentally, thinking that there is enough, thinking that you want to share. But I think it's also better if we want to create value. I think positive sum collaboration is the way to go. And that is also why over here we have this arrow that says increased resources for all. Project Humanity, our scope, the things that we can generate is continuously increasing. It is continuously growing. We as a species have this superpower that we can create technologies, we can create value, we can make more for everyone. And you and I as an individual have this power that we can increase our zone of influence. We can keep making it bigger and bigger and make the impact on the world that we want to make. So that is why we need projects. We need projects to set goals for ourselves and then turn those goals into practical engines, give ourselves this production capacity, give ourselves the things that we need, the knowledge, the execution, the people, the robots, to increase our zone of influence and start making a real impact, start making real change that fits our needs and desires, right? We're doing this because we think something is better. And this is we can have a deep philosophical debate about, who knows what is right, and are you the one who gets to make the decision? Am I the one who gets to make the decision? At the end of the day, the person who has the zone of influence, the person that has the production capacity, that have the leverage, that's the person that gets to make the decision. All I'm doing is trying to make you that person, trying to make myself that person. And then from my perspective, from my desires and needs, I am going to take part of this project and I'm going to say, hey, this part of Project Humanity, this is what we're going to do. And then we're actually going to create that. All right. Then some practical things that you can do to actually increase your zone of influence. The first thing is to build a strong track record. So you want to do things in the world. You actually want to create things. You want to build things. And then as you are doing that, you want to create a track record. You want to create a portfolio. You want to create a place where people can see what you have done. And a CV is a classical example of this, but in the modern world, it's also good to have products, to present products, to show people what you are capable of doing. The second thing that you can do is foster relationships with people. Especially nowadays, it's rare to have long-term relationships with people, to have long-term business relationships, right? Many millennials quit their job after 2 years, but actually building a long-term relationship allows us to get exponential growth because we can trust each other. We can work on projects that take multiple years to finish. And once again, one of my favorite quotes by Naval Ravikant is where he says, we want to play long-term games with long-term people. And in order for ourselves to be a long-term person, we want to be ethical. We want to be moral. We want to show people that if you collaborate with me, I'm going to be fair to you. And I'm here for the long game, right? 5 years from now, you can still build on me. 20 years from now, you can still build on me. And as we do that, we increase our zone of influence because people know that they can rely on us. The next thing that we can do, and this is so underrated but so important, is to take initiative and be proactive. I was having a conversation about this with my brother the other day, and we were just sort of thinking like how rare it is for people to just take initiative in their job, to be proactive, to do something that they weren't necessarily asked to do or expected to do, but saw an opportunity or saw something that could be improved, and that could be in their job, that could be in the world, to just take initiative, to start something just because you think that is something that needs to happen. This is so rare, and it shouldn't be rare because, first of all, it's fun to do things, and second of all, that is how we improve the world. And on the one side, it's, pretty shitty that it's so rare. on the other side, that is a beautiful opportunity for you to step up and do something that nobody else wants to do. Next up, developing social skills, right? We already talked about building relationships, but social skills are super important, especially if you want to influence that human part of the leverage, right? You want to be able to speak. You want to be able to speak your thoughts. You want to be able to write, to listen, to have conversations with people, to help them feel understood. You want to know how the human mind works, how to influence people, right? There's this whole landscape that you can navigate, this social landscape, and mastering your social skills will give you much, much more influence. The fifth thing that we can do is to become an expert at something, to become really, really, really good at something. And the piece of advice I would give here is to pick something that is a niche that is unique to you. So it can be very easy to try to become an expert in something that there's already a lot of experts in. If I'm just going to become an expert at online marketing, or if I'm going to become an expert at football, I need to compete with people that are really, really, really good at what they do. So either I need to spend 90 hours per week, need to be super talented, need to make this my life to become that top 1%, or what I can do is I can look for a unique niche. I can look for a place where, for me, it becomes very easy to become the expert. So in my particular case, for example, there's these different parts of my life that I'm bringing together in my expertise, right? So I'm an expert, not like a world-leading expert, but I'm an expert on personal development, on personal well-being. I'm an expert on design. I've been trained as a designer. I'm an expert on content creation. I know how to make podcasts. I know how to make videos. And I'm an expert at social skills. Now, any of these four things, I would maybe be in like top 10% of the world. Like I'm good at it, but I'm definitely not the Usain Bolt of design. But overlapping these four things, all of a sudden you get this unique little niche where I'm in the top 0.1% because I'm a designer that understands personal development and I know how to make content about that, right? I create a Notion system, a practical tool. I design and build that based on personal development and spiritual growth and all these deep underlying concepts. And then I'm creating a series around that to present that to people. And all of a sudden, the niche for myself, I've made that much smaller. And then I'm deciding to become an expert in this particular niche. And I think that would be my main advice. If you become an expert in a unique niche. And that niche should ideally also match your personality. The product market founder fit, right? You want to have a market, you want to have a product, but you also want to have the founder matching in there. You want you to be the guy to actually fill that niche because that's what you need in order to do the long run. So that's on the becoming an expert part. And then the last thing that you want to do, you want to actually deliver valuable output. Now, I've thought about this a lot for myself, and the way I conceptualize this, there's an axis, right? And on the left side of the axis, you have the artist, and on the right side of the axis, you have the producer. Now, an entrepreneur, someone who's really building things, someone who's in business, is completely on this side. They're trying to produce for other people. An artist is someone who is mainly producing for themselves. They're scratching their own itch. There's something that I want to let out. Now, the way you can think about this is that production is value for other people. I'm not actually going to write that out all the way. Artistry is value for ourselves. And the choice that everyone needs to make for themselves is on this spectrum. How much do I want to create value for myself? How much do I want to create value for other people? But regardless of where you choose to be on the spectrum, you want to create value. You want to create things that actually fill a need, that actually fill a desire. And then once again, of course, we use this value for that track record. And these are just 6 practical things that you can do to increase your zone of influence. If this video is valuable to you and you want to support me, then please like and subscribe down below. It really does help. Okay, so let's have a look at the project tracker flowchart, which is basically how the project tracker is operating. Now, I would like to remind you that if you want to just see the Notion part, you can skip forward, but I want to show you this so you can understand how the project tracker is working from the inside out. Now, over here, there's a button with more information. You can press that, and then for each of these parts, you get a little explanation of what it does. I will drop this flowchart in the description down below so you can just read this and you can learn about it yourself. That being said, let's start at the beginning. So every project arises from one of two places. Either it comes from a vision goal or it comes because life is simply happening. Now, ideally, as we are implementing a notion of life, as we are becoming more fluent with this system, we want most of our projects to start from a vision goal because we want projects to contribute to our larger goals, our larger vision for life. But especially in the beginning, when we're just starting out with this system, very often projects will happen because life simply happens. There is something that requires us to start a project. This might be work, this might be family, this might be other things happening around us, but we need to start this more bottom up because there's a pressing need and we can't just first take 6 months or 5 years to figure out our vision and our core value. No, shit needs to happen right here, right now. So one of these two things prompts us with this question. Does this need a project? If it does not, then we either turn it into an action item or we ignore it. If it does need a project, then the second question becomes, will this take an investment of 30 days or more? Now, once again, this is just arbitrary, like we mentioned earlier. We could also make this 45 days, we could make this 90. I just decided 30 because that's where I want to draw the line. If the investment is less than 30 days, we make a mini project. And these are basically small dashboards which don't take into consideration a lot of the preparation, a lot of the things that surround a project. And later on, I'll explain what that means. The other option is that it does take more than a 30-day investment, in which case we create a project. This is the moment we create a project inside of our project tracker. Now, when we create a project, the first thing that we do is we ask a set of preparatory questions. These are inside the tracker. I'm going to show them to you later. But basically what we want to do is we want to define the purpose of the project. Why are we doing this project? We want to look at the sacrifice. What will it cost me to do this project, right? Everything in life is a trade-off. Saying yes to one thing means saying no to everything else. So the question is, what am I sacrificing in the pursuit of this project? How challenging is this project? Am I on the edge of my capabilities? Am I getting this flow? Am I getting this meaning? Or am I going too hard or maybe too soft? Then we want to look at the complexity. So how many moving parts do I need to manage for this project? How many other people are involved? How many other stakeholders are involved? And then lastly, we want to determine the definition of done. When is this project done? Now, over here, this purpose part, you can see we start over here with the vision goal, which is part of this insight phase of the circle of growth. And then we translate that into a SMART goal, which is an achievable goal, something we can measure and something that we can achieve, which we are doing inside of this project tracker. Then the SMART goal gets translated into milestones. And like I mentioned earlier, this is where we have that line, right, where we're setting arbitrary lines in how big these goals are, but we're taking this very long-term abstract thing and make it more concrete, and have these goals that we can actually work on. And then later on, I'll show you how this is translated into the action timeline and into the action items. But it's good to see that we're using this project as a practical engine to take the vision goal and turn that into execution. All right. So we have the definition of done over here, and basically those are the conditions that we need to meet in order to complete this project. Now, often they will overlap with the SMART goal, but they don't have to. So for example, what I could say, my SMART goal is to create this business that is generating 50,000 euros in revenue each month. That is my SMART goal. But maybe I'm not going to be able to reach that goal. So I could have different completion conditions. I could say, one condition is I reach my SMART goal. I have this 50,000 in revenue. Another condition could be a process-based condition where I'm saying, if I put in 500 hours of work in trying to make this business work, this project is completed. And even if I didn't get to the revenue, even if I didn't meet the SMART goal, the conditions are still met. So this is just a way for ourselves to upfront ask ourselves the question, when am I satisfied with this project? And it goes beyond just the SMART goal, just the main goal of outcome that I want to achieve. Based on these questions, then the question comes, am I willing to commit to this project? Is this something that I'm going to do? And this is a very important step. All of this is very important. If you don't have the time to, first of all, take an hour to prepare a project, don't start a project. Projects are large commitment, large time commitment, resource commitments. There's only so many resources we have. Our resources are very limited. So really ask yourself the question, am I willing to commit to this? Because if I'm going to commit, I'm going to commit. If I'm not going to commit, that is perfectly fine. You don't have to commit to everything, but then just don't do it. Because otherwise you're going to have like 7, 8 projects going on in your life. You're not really delivering output in any of them. You're being stressed out. This is something that a lot of people get wrong. We're afraid to say no to things, but we're also afraid to say yes to things. So am I willing to commit? No, I am not willing to commit. Okay, then we either return to these questions and change the project, change the purpose, the scope, the sacrifice, all of that stuff, or we terminate it. If it's like this entire project, I don't want to do it, then we terminate it. And that is also a viable option. I think we've all heard the quote, winners never quit, quitters never win. I think this is a silly quote because I think real winners know when to quit, right? So of course, you don't want to quit halfway through when you're balls deep into the game. But sometimes you need to be able to know, hey, this is not serving me. This is not something I want to commit to. I'm going to quit because limited resources, right? Everything is trade-offs. If we are willing to commit, then we make the commitment and we actually write this out. We speak it out loud and we're saying, I am committing to making this Notion of Life system. I am committing to making this course. I, Fran Palokai, am going to make this thing, put it into the world. That is a vow I'm making to myself. I'm making a strong commitment. And when I made that commitment, then we can start moving into the execution of the project. Now, in essence, the execution of a project comes down to just one thing, and that is production capacity. And production capacity, like we discussed before, is the combination of execution and knowledge. Now, execution can be subdivided in 2 categories, and that is whether they are unique actions or whether they are repeatable actions. When we have unique actions for a project, right? So let's say, for example, I'm building the Notion of Life system. One action might be I need to create the website. One action might be I need to create the actual system. One action might be I need to record the videos. These are way too big as actions, but you can see that they are all unique actions. When an action is unique, we create an action item. Now, an action item, like we discussed in the action tracker video, is something that we can complete in one sitting. Now, we might also want to have slightly bigger goals. In that case, we can use the action timeline, and this is where we can make a chunk. So, for example, I could say, this week I want to finish the website. That could be like a bigger chunk on the timeline. And then today I want to write 500 words for the homepage. And once again, we're taking this SMART goal, making it into milestones, then chopping it up into action packs. You can almost think of it like sort of an action pack. And then we're subdividing that into action items. I'm going to show you how this works inside the project tracker later. Don't feel overwhelmed. If an action is not unique, then we create a habit. If I want to get fit, for example, I want to go to the gym every single day. And it's a habit that I need. I want to do the same thing every single day. Or if I'm working on a Notion of Life and I want to write pieces of content, maybe I want to write 500 words a day and I want to do that on a daily basis. I keep repeating the same action. When we repeat the same action, then we turn it into a habit. And both action items and habits lead to the generation of new knowledge, right? I could have a meeting, I could have a learning, I could be writing something, but then also the other way around, we are using knowledge to improve our action. And this over here, of course, is the production capacity that we talked about earlier. Okay, so then we have sort of like a lull. This is like the project tracker in and of itself. Then during our weekly review, which is the part of the system that we are going to cover in the next video, we actually check in with our projects. And we have a checklist in there where we look at our projects and we go inside. We plan actions for the upcoming week. We check how much workload we have per project. We track the progress, how far along have we come with this project. We see if it's due for review, right? Sometimes we might not want to check in with a project every week, but we just want to check in every second week. And we can also track how long past the original date that we plan to do it we are. So this is basically a way of checking in with the project that we're currently working on and to see if anything needs to change. And at the end of the week, we plan new actions. Once again, we keep going in this cycle. We keep working on the project until at some point the progress is going to be done. The project is done. And the moment that the project is done, we move into the reflection questions. So we have a bunch of questions at the end to reflect on what we learned from this project. These questions will also be resurfaced during our yearly review at the end of the year. Don't worry, that is not a lot because usually we only finish a few good projects in a year, and then we can reflect. What did I learn from this project? What did I take from this project? Did I achieve the outcome that I wanted to achieve or not? And if not, why not? So that is a reflection to really finish up this project, to put it in a nice box and make it part of what we've done and who we are. And then it is time to celebrate, because completing a project is tough. And if you manage to complete a project, you should definitely celebrate that you managed to do this, because that is just really fucking awesome. Okay, now let's dive into Notion, because this is what you're here for, building the good stuff. All the philosophy and stuff is nice, but we want to have some practical shit that we can do inside of our Notion system. So the first thing is that we, of course, go to the database collection zone. And then under the execution and planning databases, we have the project tracker. So we're just going to open up the project tracker. And then the first thing that I want to do is to show you all of the different properties that this database has. Now, some of these properties are quite complex. I'm going to explain them up front. Later on, I'm going to show you how they work and why we have them. So the first one, obviously, as always, is the name. So this is the name of the project. Want this to be clear, want this to be self-explanatory. But if you're working on a project, you'll remember the name. These things will become ingrained in your brain, because this is pretty much, all the work that you are doing. So you will always be aware of the projects that you are working on. Then the second property over here is a date property, in which we have the date span. So you can see there is a beginning date and there is an end date. We can simply click there, switch this one on to have both a beginning and an end. Beginning is going to be December 20th, and then, for example, end will be February 29th. And like that, we can set a span for how long we want this project to last. Now, this is part of making a SMART goal, which stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Now, some of those letters I don't really take into consideration, but the time-bound here is very important. We want to have a time that we want to spend on this project. Then the next property that we have over here is a formula that calculates how many days are we past the initial end date. So it's taking this last date over here, right? So I want to finish this project by June 30, or I want to finish this project by February 29. This is the time-bound aspect. And when it goes over that, it tells you how many days did you go past the initial project. So this one is 203 days overdue. This one is 142 days overdue. This one is on schedule. Formula looks a little bit complicated. I will update this later on using Formulas 2.0 and drop it in the description. And for now, you can just use this and know that it will show you how many days past the initial date you are. Now, the goal here is not that you always want to finish your projects on time. Of course, ideally you do, but at points you are going to go over the time. This helps you to see how far past the initial time you went. And then later on, when you're reflecting, also provide you with insight in where did it go wrong? Why did I go that far past the initial date? And could I change things to prevent this in the future? So as always, with everything in the system, the goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to improve. And this will just help you keep track of that. I'm just going to quickly remove this one because that's not supposed to be in there. Then the next thing we have over here is the status of a project. Now, when we set an initial project, like we just saw in the flowchart, we initially set it to next up. These are projects that are planned for the future. So let's say, for example, I'm just going to give you a little sneak peek here of what's to come. I have a vision goal over here. And this vision goal is to have a career doing what I love, earning and saving enough assets so that I have the freedom to live life on my own terms. This is actually one of my own vision goals. Then over here, I can already schedule projects ahead. I might already know a few projects in advance. Now, I don't use this very often. Usually it's more of a thing that, because projects tend to last quite long, that come up as time progresses. But you could already have a bunch of projects in here. And then you could have the status be next up, right? So it's not a project that I'm working on right now. It's a project that is next up. The other status we have is active, projects we're working on right here, right now. And then we have either the completed or terminated project. Completed is when it's met the definition of done that we set. Terminated is when we decided, actually, sometimes winners do quit, and this is the time for this winner to quit. So we terminate that project over here. Then we have a relationship to the action tracker so that we can see all of the actions that are related to a particular project. And when we get into the template, you will see why this is so tremendously valuable. Then over here, we have a number property in which we write down how many hours we are expecting to put into a certain project. Because the date span that we have over here is how long it will take, how long we have to finish it. But it doesn't necessarily say how much time we spend in a project, because one project could only require 50 hours of work, where another project could require 500 hours of work. So this expected input is much more about the total workload that this project is going to take. Then over here, we have a roll-up, which calculates how much weekly workload we have planned for a specific project. I'm going to show you later how that works. Not interesting for now. Over here, we have a roll-up that calculates how many hours we already put in. And the way we do this, also I'm going to explain this more in depth later, is by saying from this relationship that we have with this action tracker, right? We related it to the action tracker. I want from those actions to get the property input based on completed subtasks. So if I were to open an action item over here, you can see these action items have a property called total sub input. And this is the total amount of time that I put into this action item. So if this action item took, for example, 90 minutes, which I would put over here, and I've completed it, you can now see I put 1.5 hours of work into this. I'm going to show you later how this works, but basically all you need to know right now is that this one over here calculates all of the action items we did, how much time we spent on those action items, and then translates that into the total amount of time we put into this project. And then over here, we have another formula, which is the progress that we are making on this project. And what this formula does is it's saying, I got this expected input over here, right? I was supposed to put in 75 hours of work. I've already put in, based on the actions that we've been doing, I've already put in almost 7 hours of work. Then the progress that I'm at right now is 9%. So over here, we have a rough estimate of how much progress we have made for this project, right? You can see over here, total input hours divided by how much we expected to do it, and then some calculations to make sure we get the right percentage. Now, sometimes a project might already be done at 80%. Sometimes we might go way over it and be at like 150%, but this is rough ballpark number. My initial goal was 100 hours. I put in 80 hours. It gives us some insight into how much progress that we are actually making. Yeah, a little bit complicated. We'll get into it. The next property that we have over here is the review date. That is, when are we going to revisit this project? Because every week we have a weekly review. And I'll just give you another sneak peek into the system. Let's go into the weekly review. Just real quick. Over here, you can see we review our projects. And then over here, there is a review date. And that shows us this project is due for review. We have a little formula over here that also adds this red circle when it's past the review date. So were I to put this on today, for example, it is not yet due for review. But if it were over here, then it is due for review. So the review date basically means when do we need to review a particular project. Some projects need to be reviewed every single week, some every second week. That is something we can decide for ourselves. So that is the review date property, the review overdue formula, which is basically saying if the date is past this day, if today is past this date, so we're saying over here, if this moment right now is past the review date, then give me this little red circle, which just makes it easy for us to see when we need to review a project. And the last property we have over here is a relationship to the vision goal, because like we said, ideally all of our projects arise from a vision goal. So then over here you can see this one is related to that vision goal I just showed you, and that just helps us to see that the projects that we're doing are actually contributing to the person that we want to be, because that is the essence of our system. We want to bring into alignment who we are with what we do, who we are inside what we do, execution. Those are the properties that make up the project tracker. Now let's get into the most valuable and important part of this entire thing. This is where the project tracker really shines, and that is inside of the templates. Now there's two different templates. We have the new project templates, which is for general projects, for big projects, and then we have the mini projects template. Now I'm first going to run you through this one because the mini project is basically a duplication, but it's just less exhaustive. Okay, so let's just open up this template over here, and of course there's a beautiful banner. We like to have some good design, and we have our dedicated emoji because we use that for consistency, because that is one of the principles, consistency in design. And then over here, you can see a few properties that we can use initially to see the project. We have the dates pen on the top. We have the weekly workload, which basically measures how much hours we're planning to work on a project based on the actions that we've planned for the upcoming week. And then we have the expected input time, the total input that we actually already put into this project, and the progress of how far along we are with this project. The first thing that you see here on this dashboard, and I already said this in the flowchart, but I'm just going to say it again, is a reminder that if you are not able to invest 60 minutes into properly preparing this project, then don't start it. I have to explain this so often to people. I have to explain it so often to myself. It's like, I'm just going to quickly whip up this project, but I don't have the time to fill in all of these preparatory questions. Don't do it. Don't do it. Projects are large commitments. They take a lot of time, a lot of energy. If you can't spend 1 hour preparing a project, then you don't want to be spending 50 hours working on the project, right? So that's a very good proxy. Like, the barrier to entry is high. I understand it can be a lot of effort to fill in all these questions. Use that as a tool. Use that as a filtering tool to see, is this actually worthy of my time? So it's actually a very nice filtering mechanism in this sense. So that is always a reminder. If you don't have the 60 minutes to fill in the preparatory questions, don't start the project. Okay, so then the first thing that we actually do, we'll cover this later, the first thing that we then actually do is have these questions over here. And these are 5 sets of questions that help us prepare and scope the project. And I briefly showed you this in the flowchart, but let's just go through these different questions. Question number 1, and arguably one of the most important questions, is what is the main SMART goal of this project? And SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So the achievable part, I always say, fuck that. We want to be ambitious. What does achievable even mean? I don't think that one really makes a lot of sense. So actually they should be called SMRT goals, right? They need to be specific. What is it that we actually try and reach with this project? They need to be measurable. What metrics can I use to track this? How do I quantify this? How do I measure whether this project is being completed, whether this goal is being reached? Is it relevant? Is the goal relevant to this project? And even more important, is this project relevant to the overarching vision goal, the thing that I really want to put into this world? And then the last one is time-bound. When do I seek to complete this goal, and how many hours am I going to put into this goal? Now, for all questions, I always have a reminder over here. So if you're scoping this project, right, this is the SMART goal. You can just write that in there. You can open that one up. Over here, you can elaborate, right? So in this property, you can write everything you want to write about this SMART goal. And then always in the reminder, you get some extra information on how to approach this question, right? So that is the SMART goal. And just to show you real quick what sort of database we actually have here, this is a linked version. Let me show you the database title. A linked version of the reflections database, which is coming in a later video. And then inside of this linked version, we have a filter, which is basically saying that I only want to see reflections that are related to this template. So the moment I create a new project, the reflection question is automatically tied to this project. So I only see the reflections that are specific to this project. And I only want to see these 3 questions in this view. This is a quite complicated filter. All you need to know is that I just have these questions here and I can just fill them in by going over here. Okay, the next question that we have is, which vision goal does this SMART goal contribute to? Now, ideally, we've already linked a project to a vision goal, right? If we go over here, you can see this one might already be related to a vision goal. If it's not, this is the moment to prompt yourself. Let's say, for example, it's a project that came more bottom up. It's one of the Life Happens projects. This is a moment to prompt yourself, which vision goal does it contribute to? And how does it contribute to this vision goal? We always want to spend time meditating, thinking about, is the thing I'm doing contributing to the person that I want to be? Okay, the second set of questions we have over here is the sacrifice. What is the sacrifice that I need to make for this project? First question is, what are the costs of pursuing this project? How much time, how much energy, how much money? What am I giving for this project? What is the trade-off that I need to make? And then the second question is, am I willing to pay this price? It's an important question because if the price is too high and I'm not willing to pay this price, then don't do it. Very often we set ambitious goals, we have ambitious projects, but we're not actually willing to pay the price. Now, you can be ambitious, but if you're ambitious, you need to be willing to pay the price. So that's why we ask ourselves the question, am I willing to pay this price? The third question is, what will my day-to-day life look like when I'm working on this project? So this is really a moment where we tune in and we try to feel and visualize, what does my life actually look like? If I'm making this sacrifice, if I want to run a marathon, okay, I need to train every single day. I'm running 8 hours per week. I need to sleep plenty. I cannot go out for drinks. Really try to visualize, what does my day-to-day life look like when I'm working on this? And then the follow-up question there is, do I want the lifestyle that comes with the pursuit of this project? So if that is what my day-to-day life looks like, is that actually the life I want to be living? Because if it's not, better not to pursue the project, right? So this is all about asking ourselves the tough questions, but also making sure that when we commit, then we're really committed and we know, like, hey, I really want this. And it's just not just a wish or a dream, like, oh, that would be really cool. No. I actually really want to do this. Okay, so the next one is about the challenge. And this is also what I was referring to earlier on in this video. We want to be at the edge of our capabilities because that is what gets us into flow. And let me just briefly grab this chart here to illustrate this. Over here we have the user capability, what we are capable of. And over here, the task, how difficult the task is, right? Remember that leverage that we had at the beginning. What are we trying to move and how much can we move? If we are trying to move more, right? If the difficulty is higher than the capability that we have, that gives us anxiety. And if we go way to the extreme here, that ends in a burnout. On the other side, if we have very high capability, we can lift something very heavy and we decide to lift something that is very light, we become bored. You can get a bore out, right? And this is people that have a job where every day just feels like dying on the inside because it's so goddamn boring. What we want to be is we want to be right in the middle. We want to have a good balance between the capability that we have and the thing that we're trying to do. And that is why we have this challenge chapter over here. So how challenging is this project and why so? Here we try to think about how challenging is this project really and go a little deeper on that. Then the second question is, am I on the edge of my capabilities working on this? If this is how challenging it is, then how does my skill set fit into that? How do my capabilities fit into that? Am I on the edge or am I burning or boring out? And the last question then is if it's not on the edge of my capabilities, how do I make this project either easier or harder so that it is on the edge of my capabilities? The next chapter is about the complexity. This is how many moving parts are in this project. One project could be very simple, like me trying to run a marathon. It's just me. I need to go out there. I need to train. It's not super complex. But if I'm doing a project where there's a lot of people involved, I'm trying to build a product or a business, then it becomes much more complex. And complexity is very hard to manage. So it's good to think upfront about how complex this project is. What parts, what people, what environment influence this project? Then the follow-up question is, will I be able to handle this complexity? And if I will, how will I do this? How will I make sure I know how to navigate this environment, to speak to the right people, to have all the parts in place? And if I am not able to handle that, could I change something about the complexity, or could I ask someone to help me navigate this complexity? So we want to make sure that the complexity of the project is something that we're actually able to handle, because otherwise it can become very easy to drown in all the moving parts, and before we know it, we are overwhelmed. Then the next chapter over here is the definition of done, and this is basically the question, when is this project done? We want to make sure upfront that we know when this project is done. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this has a lot of overlap with the SMART goal, but the definition of done could be different. We could have other conditions that when they are met, we will terminate this project. So for example, one condition might be when I reach the SMART goal. Another condition might be when I spend 50 hours on it, then I want to quit. So it could also be a definition of termination, or it could be this one is done when I have put in so much time and energy and resources, or if I've hit certain intermediate thresholds, or if I hit one of the parts of my SMART goal. So the definition of done can also be smaller or different than just a SMART goal, but usually the SMART goal is at least one of the potentials of the definition of done. Also good to mention there is that when you have this definition of done, it could have different options, right? You could say either I do this, either I do that, or either I do that. I don't have to hit all three. If I hit one of these three, I consider this project to be done. Then we look at which steps will I need to complete to finish this project. What are the intermediary steps, right? We're going from the left side, vision goals, SMART goals, milestones. And this is also what we fill in here. It's also what we put over here for the milestones. So these are smaller things that I need to complete on the way for this project to become done. And then the last question that we ask ourselves is, what would it take for me to quit pursuing this goal? Like I said, sometimes winners do quit, and it can be very valuable to think upfront, when are you going to quit? So if my goal is to have a business that generates 50,000 in revenue, I could have a condition where I'm saying, if within 3 months I'm not already generating 5,000 in revenue, then I'm so far off track that I'm going to quit pursuing this goal, because apparently it is not working out. So we can set conditions up front for when we want to quit this goal. And then when we quit, we can also feel much better about our decision, because we know this is not just a sign of weakness or laziness. No, this is me making a wise decision, because this is not the goal that I want to be spending my limited time and resources on. And then the last thing that we have over here is the commitment. We speak out my commitment to this project, right? And we make that a strong statement. We set it down and then speak it out loud, share it with people, convince yourself and say, I'm going to do this. I am making this commitment. I am going to put in 500 hours of work in the next 6 months. Like, that is a big ass commitment, but I've thought about this properly. I filled everything in. Now it is time. It is time to make that commitment. So that is why we put the commitment in over here. Okay, so that is the preparatory question section. Once again, if you're unable to invest the time to do this, don't start the project. Over here, the next thing that we have is the project workspace, and this is where the magic happens. As you can see, we have 5 different database views over here. 3 of them are related to action, right? Action habits and the action timeline. 2 of them are related to knowledge. this is our production capacity. This is the practical engine that is going to help us turn our visions, our desires, our needs into reality. So let's start with the basic, and that is the related action items. Now, for all of these databases, what we do is that we have, I'm just going to show you, a linked version of the specific database. So in this particular case, it's a linked version of the action tracker. And then inside of the action tracker, we actually have a property. I'm just going to show you that property over here, where it's related to the project tracker. So this particular action item is related to this particular project. Now, the reason that we have this relationship property, is that so when we have that, we can say over here, I want to filter my actions to only show action items that are related to this project template, right? And we do the same for our habits. We do the same for our meeting notes. We say over here, I only want to see habits related to this project tracker. I only want to see meeting notes related to this project tracker. And to be able to do that, we need to create a relationship between the two databases, right? We need to make sure that these databases know that the other one exists. Now, you might wonder, but why didn't we see all those relationships over here? It's because we don't need to see them on the project tracker side. We don't need to filter anything on the project tracker. And the only one we actually need is the action tracker and vision goals. So we only need to see it one-way street. And the reason that's the case is because over here, I'm showing the actions database. I'm showing the habits database. And inside that actions database, I want to create a filter based on the project tracker. But we don't need to create a filter inside the project tracker. We don't need to create a filter the other way around. Complicated stuff, I would reference you back to the video where we look at relational databases. Just good to know each and every one of these has a relationship. So I'm going to hide that one in the view because we don't need it over here. And then so over here we have this filter that it's only showing actions related to this project tracker template. Now, suppose that I would have made an actual project. Let me just open up this one, for example. Then this filter is automatically changed to only show action item related to this particular dummy project over here, right? So the moment you generate a template, this filter is automatically adjusted. It goes from template into the page that you actually created, right? So we have a sort of like dynamic filter. It's a really cool feature that Notion has. One of my favorite things. Saves a lot of time and energy. Right. So we only see action items related to this project, and the moment I add a new action over here, if I were to open up this action, you can see it is related to this project. So over here, we have all the actions that we want to be doing for this particular project. Now, before we dive deeper into this one, I first want to show you the action timeline, because this is an intermediary step that we can use to translate a milestone into an action. So we keep going more granular, right? We're starting with these goals and we keep getting smaller. We want to end up on actions. But what you can do in the action timeline is you can actually scope action chunks for longer periods of time. So let's say, for example, there's something I want to be working on this week. This week I want to finish the website. All right, I can drag that one out. Next week I want to publish 3 videos. Right, we can start creating this timeline of actions that we want to take. Now, the moment I add them to the timeline here, they also appear over here. There we go. These are the action chunks. These are the bigger actions that I want to do. And what you can see over here is that these action chunks have this little emoji over here. And I briefly showed this in the action tracker video, but there I told you I was not going to go in too deep. Well, now we are, because over here there is a parent template. And these are basically action items that we call parent actions. They're not an action that we complete in one sitting, but they are a larger action in which we have these actions that we can complete in a single sitting. I'll briefly show you this template. It basically says that the action status is parent, and it gives this little emoji to easily recognize it. And the moment that we add a new action over here, the default template is a parent. So anything that we add in the timeline It's automatically a parent. And my apologies, the sun is right in my face. I hope it doesn't bother you too much. So then over here we have these parent actions with also a date span. So they don't just have a due date, they have a date span. Then what we can do is we can go inside a parent action, right? Over here with this little toggle, and we do this by going into the properties, and then over here we have sub items, and we have sub items enabled, right? I could also disable this, but I'm going to enable it. And that allows me to, under this parent action, create sub actions. So finish the website, and then one thing might be create lo-fi wireframe, right? Or publish video. One could be write first script. Maybe that's easier to understand for the non-designers out there. Record a video, edit a video, and then publish a video. And like this, we can easily gather our actions that we actually want to do in a single sitting and organize them by parent action. Then the rest of this view just works like the regular action tracker. We just have all the actions in here that we want to do. And for example, this write first script, I'm going to say that has the action date for the 21st. This one has for 22nd. This one has for 23rd. And this is something that we do during the weekly review. During the weekly review, we check in with this view and make sure that all the actions are scoped. Now, over here, we have a few properties. And what we do for action items, you don't have to do this, but I think it's quite valuable to have a rough estimate of how long we think this action item will take. So writing a script will take me approximately 60 minutes. Recording a video will probably take me like 90 minutes. Editing will probably take me like 120 minutes, and then publishing only takes like 30. Over here, you can see that automatically this formula called weekly workload also changed. What this formula does is it checks if an action item is due for the upcoming week. So it checks over here, is this action item due for the upcoming week? All of these are. If that is true, then take this projected input, turn it into hours, and add it to the weekly workload. If I were to, for example, put this one on last week or on in 2 weeks, it doesn't register, right? So there's no weekly workload. So it's only action items for the upcoming week, which then get this weekly workload. And then what you can see over here is that inside this project, we now have the weekly workload being adjusted to the total amount of time that we have right over here, right? So this is a rollup, and a rollup is basically saying that from this relation to the action tracker, I want you to grab this property, this weekly workload property, and then give me the total sum, right? So it's grabbing this property over here. Were I to remove one of these, for example, I would set this to like the week after. You can see the weekly workload is gone because this formula only counts actions for the upcoming week. And then this roll up, once again, only takes the sum of this weekly workload over here. So you can see the workload has now been reduced to 4.5 hours. So by simply assigning a estimated time, this doesn't have to be accurate, it's just an estimated time, you automatically get to see how much workload you're expecting to put in this project in the upcoming week. Now, were I to complete these actions over here, then over here you can see another formula which is calculating if this has been ticked, then you can see the digits change. Count this as time actually spent working on this project. And this is then calculated in the rollup of total input in hours. So this is once again going into this relationship with the action tracker, but now we're grabbing this property total amount of time spent working on this project. And let's say, for example, that my goal was to spend 20 hours. You can see that the progress is automatically calculated. So if I were to uncheck these boxes, this is 10% progress, but as I'm going through time, and the cool thing here is, right, let's say these actions over here, let's put them for today. I'm just going to put them for today. I'm just going to go into my execution zone. This is where we usually live. I just have my daily action list over here. These are my daily actions. You can see they are related to this project. I could just tick them off in my action tracker, and when at the end of the week I check in with my project, it's automatically been added over here. I automatically have that input, and my progress is automatically being measured. So complicated to set up and understand, but once you have that understanding, all you need to do is fill in this over here. That's all you need to do, just an action date and this over here. Everything on the right here happens all by itself. And like that, we can easily track how much time we're planning to work on a project, how much time we actually put in, and how much progress we are making towards this project. So that is why we have all these properties, formulas, and stuff over here. And a little extra bonus is that we also have one roll-up, which is basically showing how much time did one parent action take. So if the parent action is published 3 videos, it calculates all the sub-actions that have been completed, and then it shows me, hey, this parent action took 5 hours to complete. Not super necessary. I don't use this one a lot, to be honest, but it's there in case you want to track it. So just to recap, because this is quite complex, we can create parent actions on the timeline. And then from those parent actions, we can create sub-actions in this view. These sub-actions we can just execute in a single sitting. And inside those sub-actions, we make a rough estimate of how much time we are going to put into this action item. And then if they are due for the upcoming week, they are added to the weekly workload, which we can see over here. And then when we complete them, they're added to the total input that we put into the actions, and that is calculated over here and also works towards this progress. Now, not all actions are always coming from the timeline. There's also things that come bottom up, requests people have, just things that come up in the moment. Of course, you can just add a new action here. And then if you put the time in there and the date, it's not part of a parent action, but it will still just work just the same. And the reason it works just the same is because this one does not have that status of parent. And then over here, you can see it's added to that weekly workload. Okay, so that is the action part of this dashboard. That's how we track all the actions that we have for a project. Then we also have habits, or we don't have to have habits, but we could have habits. So these are actions that are repeatable. So if, for example, for this business, I want to cold call 10 people every single day or 3 times per week for the coming 3 months, then I could make that a habit. Cold call people. I'm going to do that 3 times per week. I'm going to do that from the office. I'm going to do that at 8 in the morning. And that is a habit I'm currently building. It takes about 30 minutes. This is an action I'm repeating. That is why it's a habit. We don't need to do all these unique actions for this. This is something I do over again. We are going to cover the habit tracker in a future video. So for now, I'm not going to go into that much deeper, but just know that a project can either be repeatable actions or non-repeatable actions, and we can track both inside of this dashboard. Once again, filter to only show habits related to this particular project. Okay, then next up we have the 2 knowledge views. The first one is the meeting notes, and this one is just a very practical one. We can use this whenever we have a meeting with someone. We can just create a new one over here. The meeting note is automatically generated. So if you go over here, you can see that under templates, we have meeting notes template is set to default. So it automatically makes a meeting note template. We can just open that one up, and then we can prepare the agenda, have our key takeaways, have our meeting actions. We've covered all of this in the knowledge database video, so I'm not going to go too much in depth on that. And then the last part that we have over here is the general knowledge view. And over here we have all of the created knowledge. These are all our ideas, our brainstorms, all the things that we have generated, and all of the learning knowledge. These can be things that we've gathered from articles, from books, from podcasts, and we're taking all this stuff and we have it in one central place. And once again, we're only seeing knowledge pieces related to this particular project. So we have all the knowledge, all the execution in one central place, all the production capacity to help us realize the goals that we want to realize. Few small things here. We have a little Scratchpad for ideas that we just want to jot down real quick. Last week, I also showed you we have a general Scratchpad, right? We have that one over here for very tiny ideas. What we can do during our daily review, right? Let's open up a daily review real quick. What we could do during our daily review is when we have the Scratchpad over here and we can say, hey, actually this particular idea is related to this project, you can simply grab that, Command X, go into that project, and put it in the Scratchpad here. So Scratchpad is just quick ideas. Usually I have like 30 points in there over time. And then when it gets too big, I apply some methods to filter it out and get the value from it. So these are just like very quick notes that don't need a particular knowledge piece to be created. Over here we have the milestones, which are things that we want to achieve as we go, right? So if my goal is to get 50,000 revenue per month, then maybe one of my goals is finish the web shop, earn 10 in revenue, get 50 customers. These could all be milestones, right? And we also had that over here in the definition of done, right? Which steps will I need to complete? We have the milestones over here, and as we're progressing, we can just simply check those off. Then the third part here is the links and documents. These are all of the knowledge pieces that cannot live inside of Notion, things that are reports, documents, things that are externally generated and cannot be used on Notion. We can simply put that over here. And that is basically the project workspace. So then when we have finished a project, when the project is officially done, then we can move into this last section, which is the reflection questions, which just help us think back on everything that we've done. The first question is, what were the objectives that you set out to complete and what did you actually end up completing, right? Because sometimes the objectives, they change midway. For example, during our monthly review, we also check in with our SMART goals. So I can show you that over here. Another sneak peek. Today you're getting all the sneak peeks into the system. And just accidentally generated that one. Over here you can see we have all the active SMART goals. And we might change those during our monthly reviews. As we're going, we might change these active SMART goals. So the thing that we initially were scoping might change as we are moving along with this project. So that's the first question. What were the objectives? What did I actually do? The second question is, how satisfied are you with the outcome and the process of this project? So we both measure the result. What did it end up giving me? Did I get this 50K revenue that I wanted to get? But we also check in with the process. Is the process of the project something that I am satisfied with? Did I enjoy doing this project? Is there things that I need to improve? Then the next question is, how much time and energy did I plan to invest, right? What were the expected hours and the expected timeline? And then how much did I actually end up investing? Is there a gap between those two things? Is there something that I can learn from that? And then the last question is, what did I learn from this project? Anything else that I just want to write down, any insights, anything that I learned, anything that I gained, we can just write that down here. And then, of course, we celebrate the completion of this project because, like I mentioned during the flowchart part of this video, completing a project is hard. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of commitment, and you should celebrate that. You should celebrate yourself for doing that. You should celebrate for making this commitment and seeing it through, and that is the end of the project tracker template. Cool. Okay. Last thing we are going to discuss is the project views. So let's go back into the database collection zone, open up the project tracker over here. And then there's a bunch of views that we have over here. The first one is the timeline. The timeline is basically a timeline with all of the projects that we have got going on. And this one, you can find it in the planning zone, just like you can find the next up projects in the planning zone. And basically, it's just a nice visual overview of all the projects and their place in time. You can see this is a project that's active. This one is next up. You can see the date that the time span has. Then the other view is the next up projects. These are all the projects that are not currently active, but that we are planning to work on in the future. Then we have the active projects, which are all the projects that we are currently working on, right? Status is active, and we can see the weekly workload that we have for these projects. You can find these in the execution zone over here. All of the active projects are inside the execution zone. Then we have the completed and terminated projects. These are similar views, but one is the projects that we actually completed successfully, other ones that we terminated. You can find these in the review zone right over here. Completed and terminated projects. There are no projects in here, but if I were to, for example, change this one, give that a status of completed, then of course you would see that here in the completed projects. So completed and terminated projects. And the last view that we have, just going back over here, is the weekly review view. And this is the one I showed you briefly earlier, where during the weekly review, which is what we're going to cover in the next video, we have a view. So I'm just going to open this one up, open the weekly review template, open up that page, and then look over here, and we have a view in which we can see the progress of the project, the project name, so we can easily open it, and we can easily add new actions as we're planning the week ahead. Then we have the weekly workload, the review date and whether it's overdue, and how many days past date. And next video, I'm going to show you how this works, but that is basically the weekly review project tracker view. And those are all of the different views. Now, before we get into the recap, I am really curious to hear how you are currently structuring your projects and if there's anything that you learned from this video. And also, if you have any questions, any remarks, do let me know in the comments down below. I reply to every single one of them. Let's have a brief recap of what we discussed. Starting at first principles, the essence of nature is change. Things are always changing, things are impermanent, they're always in flux. And the question then becomes, how do we want to influence this change in a way that fits our desire and our personal needs? This can be done on a very small and simple scale. We can make small influences into reality, or very big and complex. And where we draw something on this line, that is where we set goals. But goals are completely arbitrary. They're just a way of giving us some guidance, but they're completely arbitrary in where we set them. Now, when we set a goal, we need wisdom to know what it is that we desire. What is the goal that we want to set? Then we need knowledge to know how are we going to get there. If this is the thing that I want to create, then how do I use the building blocks of reality to actually get that thing? That is where we need the knowledge. And then the next part is that we actually do it. We execute it. We actually influence the world to create the planned structure. And this combination of knowledge and execution, that is what we call our production capacity. So we need production capacity in order to turn our goals into reality. So how do we increase our production capacity? We can either increase the size of our own production capacity through learning and skill acquisition, which is usually done through personal projects. We can increase the quantity by influencing people and robots, which usually happens in collaborative projects. And then humans are influenced by social dynamics and by capital. Right? We either pay them or we influence them through our social skills, and robots are influenced through technical skills. And of course, humans can influence robots, and robots can also influence humans. And just like that, we can increase the total amount of production capacity that we have to actually reach the goals that we are trying to reach. And as we are increasing our production capacity, increasing our leverage, increasing our competence, our zone of influence becomes bigger. So we start off with a small zone of influence, but we can grow that with leverage and competence. Then some parts of Project Humanity are permissionless and skill locked. These are things nobody wants to do or nobody is doing that we can simply go and do. The only barrier is that we need the skills to be able to execute it. But there's also things that are permissioned and resource locked. And this is usually where our part of Project Humanity overlaps with somebody else's project of humanity. And then we need to negotiate. Either this is going to become a competition where it's a zero-sum dynamic, right? Either I win or you win, or it's going to become a collaboration, a positive-sum dynamic where 1 + 1 = 3. The two of us come together to generate extra value for both of us. And ideally, that is the game that we want to be playing as humanity. We want to increase the resources for everyone. Then we looked at some practical things that you can do to increase your zone of influence, which is building a strong track record and portfolio, having long-term relationships, long-term games with long-term people, taking initiative, being proactive, doing things just because you think that they need to be solved, developing your social skills, speaking, listening, public speaking, leadership, becoming an expert, and then preferably becoming an expert of your own particular niche. And the last one is delivering valuable output and doing so on a consistent basis. And then inside of Notion, we had a look at the different properties that make up the project tracker database. So we have the name, we have the date span, we have how many days we are past the originally planned date, we have the status of the project, we have the related action items, we have the expected input, which is how much time we're expecting to work on this project, the weekly workload, which is calculated based on the action items that are part of this project, the total input, which is how many hours we actually put into this project, and the progress, which is a calculation where we check how much hours did I want to spend and how much did I actually end up spending. We have the review date, which is when should this project next be reviewed, with this little formula that shows us in a nice visual, and the related vision goals. And then inside of here, we have the project template. We explored this one in depth. Has, of course, a reminder: if we don't have 60 minutes to scope this project, don't do it. We have the project workspace containing everything, all the knowledge and execution that we need to actually turn our goals into reality. We have the Scratchpad for quick ideas, the milestones, the things we want to achieve as we go along, external links and docs, the preparatory questions to make sure that this is actually the project that we want to be working on, that it's aligned with our purpose, that the sacrifices we need to make, we're willing to make them, that the challenge is on the optimal point where we get into this flow state, where things become meaningful, that the complexity is something that we can manage, that we have a clear definition of done, and that we then speak out the commitment. And once we've finished the project, we have the reflection questions to look back at what we've learned, what we've done, if everything went to plan, basically any insights that we got from this particular project. The other template, which we didn't cover, is the mini projects template. It's pretty much the same as the project tracker template, just without the questions. You can use this for tiny projects that take less than 30 days, where you just need to organize things without all these scoping and ideas. I would recommend to try to use this as little as possible, but sometimes it's just a handy way to organize a few things. And then lastly, we had a look at the different views: timeline view for in the planning zone, next up projects in the planning zone, currently active projects in the execution zone, the completed and terminated projects for in the review zone, and then lastly, the weekly review in which we check in with our project tracker. If you want to build the Notion of Life system from scratch using all these videos, then all power to you. If instead you just want to use the template straight away, then enrollment for a Notion of Life is currently open. You can grab a 20% early bird discount in the description down below and get the template straight away. However, I never want money to be the reason people cannot get access to my material. So if the price is too steep, send me an email and we'll arrange something. As mentioned in the beginning of this video, all the links, assets, and resources mentioned in this video are linked in the description down below. In the next video, we are going to explore the weekly review, which is the process that we use at the end of the week to start and end our weeks with clarity and intent. If you want to watch this series, there is a playlist on my channel, so you can just watch all the episodes in there. And for now, I just want to thank you for watching. And remember, the nature of reality is change. But how it changes, that is up to us.